ይስጥልን ተመልካቾቻችን እንደምሰንብታችኋል። ይህ የብርሃን ቲቪ ነው። የብርሃን ቲቪ በቶሮንቶ ካናዳ የሚያስተላልፈው ፕሮግራም አሁን ጀመረ።
Yeah, he won the Evergreen Award. So with this message, I would like to welcome my brother from my other mom, Desmond, to the stage. Please help me to welcome him to the stage. Thank you.
I want to start by saying what a wonderful privilege and honor it is for me to be invited here to speak today. I received a call from Messerat, and she told me that the Indian Association of the GTA was hosting this event, and that in addition to celebrating the Adwa victory, that this event was going to be held at the end of February to coincide also with Black History Month. And she said, we want you to come and speak because we want to connect this historic battle and this historic victory for Ethiopia with the ongoing liberation struggle of Black people everywhere. And that message resonated so strongly with me, and it was such a great honor. So I want to say thank you, first of all, to Messerat and to the entire community for welcoming me here this afternoon. Thank you. The reason I feel so honored to be here is because I believe in connecting the struggles of our ancestors and the struggles of our history to the struggles that we are facing as Black people here in this country today. And so that this celebration is about fighting against imperial power. It's about fighting against colonialism. It's about Black people of different backgrounds uniting for that purpose. And it would be wrong if I did not also say that we are in a country that has also been colonized. We are in a country where indigenous peoples of these lands who have been here for thousands and thousands of years are also part of an ongoing colonial struggle because they do not control the land or the resources of these territories. They do not control the laws of this land. The indigenous peoples, the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples of this land have had that taken away from them in an ongoing colonial struggle that continues to this day. And we learn more every day about the residential school system that Canada perpetrated against Indigenous peoples. We learn more about the history that has been tried to be hidden from all of us. But if we are in celebration against colonialism and against imperial forces, we have to acknowledge always the struggle, the ongoing struggle of Indigenous people in this country as well. It's very fashionable today to say a land acknowledgement and we open our official events at the City of Toronto and other places and we say, we acknowledge the land that we are on. Acknowledgement is not enough. Acknowledgement is not justice, acknowledgement is not reparation. So, just as I believe in reparation for Black people, I also believe in reconciliation, reparation, and land back and justice for Indigenous peoples. It is such an honor to be here today also because, yes, it's Black History Month. I have been thinking so much over the years about what Black History Month really even means for me. On the way here, I was in the subway. And maybe some of you have been in the subway system or you see on the buses. You see these posters and they have pictures of people who are being celebrated as Black community leaders. And one thing is common that pretty much all of the posters of people that I've seen, maybe not every single one, but pretty much all of them are dead Black people. They are not Black people who are living and fighting and struggling for liberation today, right now. And one of my big issues with Black History Month is that it is one of these celebrations that is put on almost to say whatever you were going through, Black people, that was in the past. That was then. Don't worry about now. But it was only last summer in this very city that the police chief came out and said, it's true. There are 2 reports that are out. Those reports are about use of force against Black people, police brutality, about strip searches, about unnecessary stops of Black people. And he was apologizing to us for that last summer, just 8 months ago. That is not history. That's what we are experiencing as Black people now. That is what I am documenting in my work today. That is the modern, ongoing struggle for all of us as Black people trying to live and make our way in this city. And so the struggle of the past is today's struggle also. And if we are going to recognize that, we can't just talk about our history, we have to talk about our liberation today, our liberation struggle that is happening right now for our children and for the future generations that are going to come after us. I work in the area of journalism, and a lot of my work focuses on the police. A lot of my work, not all of my work, but I have spent a lot of the last many years writing about policing in Toronto and the harms that policing is doing in our communities. It is very exhausting work. It is sometimes feels hopeless, and yet I carry on because I too come from an ancestral past and struggle that I feel as being ongoing. I wish I had learned, yes. I wish I had learned what I'm about to tell you right now when I was in school, but they didn't teach us what I'm about to tell you. My ancestry, my family is from Sierra Leone. And for those of you who don't know, Sierra Leone is on the west coast of Africa, right on the Atlantic Ocean, next to Liberia. And Sierra Leone has a very distinct history, and a history that connects to this country and to my ancestry. The people that I am descended from, the Creole people, are people who returned to Sierra Leone after being emancipated. They won their freedom from enslavement, and many of them decided to go back to West Africa, hence the capital city where my parents were born, called Freetown. Some of those freed enslaved people came through what is today called Nova Scotia. And many of them have the same last names that I have in my family. They could very much be my direct ancestors. But you know, when I was in school, we didn't learn about that history. So, just as my ancestors had to fight in order to be free, I don't believe that that struggle is over today. And I focus on policing so much because I see the harmful effect that policing has in our day-to-day lives. It is not a question for me about focusing on individual police officers and trying to make an argument whether they are good or bad. It's so much bigger than that. It is about a system of power that looks at us as black people walking down the street, driving in our car, our children going to school, and they see an opportunity to abuse us, to take advantage of us in a racist way that is going to say, well, they probably had it coming. They were probably up to something. They were probably breaking the law. And we are targeted as a result of this ongoing colonial mentality, which includes the enslavement of black people right where we are in what was then called Upper Canada, the enslavement of indigenous people, the policing of those people. So where does our modern policing come from? One of the ideas of the modern police force in Canada is needing to drive indigenous peoples off of their land if they didn't want to leave. They created something called the Northwestern Mounted Police. And today that is called the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And today, all of the land struggles in British Columbia for a pipeline project, for dam projects, just down the road in 6 Nations of the Grand River, a huge development project, all trying to take more land from the original peoples of these territories and say, no, this is Canada now. Your customs and your traditions and your territory doesn't matter anymore. That is the history of where the police have come from. And in our case as black people, when we were enslaved on these lands, any black person was subject to being stopped wherever they were on these territories. That is one of the ways that modern policing evolved. So today, when we look on the news and we see that there is carding, right? There is the stopping of black people for no reason and taking our information. That has a history and a legacy going back to the time that we were not allowed to be free on this land because we were property of other people. So that is not just in the racist mind of one police officer or one bad individual or a few bad individuals. It is generations of systemic racism that is continuing to be practiced now that we are fighting against. And so, although the struggle is difficult, I believe that it's my inheritance as a black person to continue to fight for my own liberation and to fight for the liberation of every black person until all of us can say truly that we are free. I was in a class recently and we talked about Malcolm X, the incredible freedom fighter in the United States who was murdered while he was struggling for black liberation. Malcolm X said something in a speech that I think about a lot. As militant as a reputation as Malcolm X had, as much as he is remembered for being fierce and uncompromising in his ideas, Malcolm X nevertheless said that he believed that in America, black people had a chance for a revolution that was without blood, a bloodless revolution. He believed this despite growing up in a segregated America, growing up in an America where black people didn't have basic rights. He still believed that the struggle that he was waging could be won without a gun, without an army, without bloodshed. This is one of the reasons that he's one of my heroes, because I see the country that we live in today and I see how much black people are struggling in employment. I see how much black people are struggling through the immigration system and to reunite with our families if we are able to even get here, to bring our families here to also come be with us. And that struggle seems to be getting harder as time goes on. We're struggling and fighting against the police, and as I was mentioning, we're fighting against child welfare systems that more and more take black children out of our homes and away from us and put us into the state's control. Nevertheless, I believe what Malcolm X said. I believe that the struggle we are fighting can be won without a gun, without blood, without an army. That we can use our position, our social position, to rally with other black people and indeed with other oppressed groups all across these territories and with indigenous peoples, and to try and remake this country into something that actually cares for and serves all of us. And that's the struggle. I believe that that struggle is possible and that it doesn't have to be a violent struggle. But it is violence that we face when we are put in jail, when we are stopped, when we are denied the opportunity to use the gifts that we were given in this country, when we are discriminated against in the workplace. That's violence that we are facing. And so, how do we respond without returning that violence against the people who are doing it to us? I believe that we have to organize. And that is what I spend my time trying to do. So, if we believe that the money that is being spent in our city to criminalize us should instead be being used to serve us, we have to organize and fight for that. If we see, look at what is happening. We're seeing all of this stuff about violence in our streets, violence particularly on the Toronto transit system. And the only answer that the leadership has in this city is, you know what we need? We need more policing. We need more force. We need to intimidate people into coming on transit so that they are afraid and that they won't come on the system. We need to scare the bad people away. This doesn't work. They know it doesn't work. But they are only in power for short periods of time. And they're always thinking about the next election period. They're not thinking about how to invest in our communities for the next 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 years. We need to think like that if they are not going to. We need to fight a long-term struggle if the people in political office are not going to do so. And so, together with a group that I am a part of called the No Pride in Policing Coalition, that is what we are trying to do. I want to leave you with a challenging idea that I have been fighting for and that maybe many of you are hearing and other people talking about it. And maybe you hear this and you don't understand where it is coming from. People say that it is not even enough to reform the police, that they want to abolish the police, get rid of the system of policing entirely. I believe in this, of course, but I know a lot of people do not understand this idea, are skeptical of this idea, are afraid of this idea, maybe even think that this idea is damaging, that it is dangerous, that it will actually make our communities even less safe than they are now. And so I would like to put it to you like this. If you can imagine What is it that a police officer does in our society that someone else cannot do? That is the question that I have for you. What is it that the police do that no one else are able to do in our communities? We have fought to get police out of our schools. You heard mentioned that I wrote a book. An entire chapter of my book, The Skin We're In, is about the struggle to get police officers out of our schools. Well, yes, there is violence in our schools. Yes, there are children who bring weapons to school. That's true. That is not going to be stopped by a police officer, though. The only thing that can address those things is supporting young people in our communities to make a different choice. But we have young people who don't have enough food to eat in the morning to go to school, but we don't fund breakfast programs in Toronto the way that we fund the police. We have young people who don't have anywhere to go after school is over, but we don't fund community services the way that we fund the police. Are the police going to babysit our children? Are the police going to give knowledge to our children? Are the police going to raise our children? Are the police going to teach our children how to love and care for each other? No, that's not their role. Their role is law enforcement. But we have given them so much power and so much authority that there is so little left for the things that we all actually need to thrive and to live. And so when we talk about abolishing the police, we do not mean getting rid of safety. We mean calling someone else when an incident happens. We mean calling somebody else to provide support and care rather than to bring force. I have been part of a group fighting for a young man who died in October. His name was Taresh Bobby Ramroop, and he was 32 years old. He was just about to turn 33. Bobby was on his balcony on October 13th, and he was throwing things off of the balcony because he was in mental health crisis. What he needed that day was support. He needed care. Instead, multiple Toronto police officers were sent to his apartment, and they surrounded his apartment for hours. They threatened that they were going to break into his apartment, even though he was just there by himself in mental health crisis. Bobby's mom and the rest of his family rushed home when they heard what was happening. And instead of the police allowing this young man in crisis to speak to his mother, who begged over and over to speak with him, the police kept Bobby's family in the superintendent's office on the ground floor while he was upstairs alone on the 16th floor. And his family were in that office building when he finally tried to climb out the window and fell to his death. They sent the police. We had the biggest police response that was available that day. Multiple officers, officers with helmets, officers with battering rams to knock the door down, officers on the roof with cables to rappel down. We had all the police that we needed, but we couldn't help a young man in mental health crisis because he didn't need any police. He needed care. He needed his mom. He needed services. He needed to go to the hospital. But we keep making this decision over and over and over. And when somebody like Bobby loses their life, we blame the victim. We say he should have listened to what the police said. We said he should have obeyed their commands. We have to change the way that we respond. And my argument is not that the police are evil people. My argument is that you do not send the police to a healthcare crisis. That is the point. And all the things that we are, yes, all the things that we are asking police to do, to be our nurse, to be our social worker, to go wake up the person sleeping on the TTC, someone else can do that job. And they don't need a gun to do that job. They don't need the authority to take a life in order to do that job. And so what we are asking when we talk about abolition is reimagining the way that we respond and making better decisions, making better choices with the resources we have, and prioritizing care and love and concern for people over harm, and punishment. As I continue to fight for my liberation as a black person, I want to continue to join with people like you. I want us to learn about our history, and I want us to continue moving forward that history by recognizing that our liberation struggle together as black people is far from over. So again, with the greatest of humility, I want to say thank you so very much for inviting me here. And I hope everyone enjoys the celebration. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Desmond. Please, let's give him long applause. Just. For some of us, his presentation can sound long, but it's not. I mean, from what he went through and from his experience, this is just a little bit. So it's long, so it can never be enough, I mean, to be told, because that is what touches everybody's household, especially our youngsters, our youth. So this knocks everybody's door, so one way or the other, it's our story, what he explained and what he described. So we should stand together to come against all this brutality and all this injustice. So thank you again, Desmond. Really appreciate your presence with us. Next, I would like to invite one of our youth members, Rebecca Girma, to say a little bit about the history of Adwa.